Oh, hey, what's up?
Oh, nothing much. How are
Great.
you?
I'm good. I'm good. You watching any good movies lately? Have you been watching The Last of Us?
I have not, but I've been hearing everyone talking about it. Well, the social media and whatever, not, but I know nothing about it, but it's probably really depressing, I'm sure.
Well, did you ever play the game?
The Last of Us?
Yeah,
I don't think I have.
it's about murder mushrooms. It's only half a joke, because like it's like about like so there's this like fungus that's actually real and it kills ants and like it like turns them into zombies. Like that really happens, but it like can't survive in humans. And so in this reality, it's like evolved to survive in humans. So it's literally what the show is. It's like mushrooms growing inside of people, and then they turn into zombies.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's a strange concept. But I'll watch anything with Pedro Pascal in it because yeah, that's my guy.
Which
We all have a guy.
which streaming service is that one on?
It's HBO. It's the
Okay.
home box office. No, how does it go? The static.
I
Here's a
don't
good
know.
question. How would you spell static sounds? Like the like snow screen? Anyways.
I guess you'd have to do like SESESESESES. I don't know.
I don't know. All right. Yeah, this is a sports podcast. We're just kind of doing our thing where we wait for people to show up. We're going to talk about Sean Payton. We're going to talk about the Saints coaching staff apocalypse, Coachopolis, Coachocalypse, Coach. I don't know.
Coach Apocalypse. Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
the
That.
anti continuity season that we are going into. And then we're going to do a mailbag in the back half, the final segment of this program. So get your questions and comments in the feed, and we'll get to that. I think this is kind of how we'll handle the second episode of the week for during the off season. Is kind of just do a regular live mailbag on Thursdays because it just seems like a good way to get some content out there. So mark down your calendars. But like you don't really have to because it's always the same like 7 people. So yeah.
Put it as your Google reminder or whatever.
Yeah. So and just I've been out at the Senior Bowl all week. We're not really going to talk a ton about the Senior Bowl today. I think we're going to get into a good amount of that next week because so I can collect kind of my thoughts and watch the game because that's always fun. And then we'll get into more of that. But I figured we have all this craziness going on this week, which was fun to handle while I was sitting in a hotel room in Mobile. And then since we have stuff to talk about, we might as well talk about it, right?
Yeah, I mean the amount of stuff that seemed to come out though, one after another, too, just kind of it was pretty staggering.
It was obnoxious. That's what it was. I was looking forward to it. I was like, I'm gonna go out to Alabama. I'm just gonna hang out in a hotel room. I'm gonna do nothing because there's nothing to do in Mobile.
Say, what do you think? You're hanging by the pool in Bama?
Yeah, no. So I always hang out. Like, I stay at the Holiday Inn by the stadium because, like, the annoying thing about the Senior Bowl is the convention center where they do this stuff and like do press conferences stuff is downtown, but like the University of South Alabama is like 20 minutes away. So you kind of have to decide whether you're going to stay downtown or stay by the stadium. And I would much rather stay by the stadium because like when you sit out at practice for 4 hours, I would rather just be able to go back to my hotel room 3 minutes away than drive 25 minutes. But that means that I have to wake up at 6 a.m. to go to the press conferences in the morning, and I almost always don't.
It's funny how that works.
Like there's a breakfast that starts at like 7 a.m. after the first day of practice, and I'm always like, I'll be there. And then I wake up at like 6:30, like I'm gonna go downstairs and eat the rubber eggs that Holiday Inn serves.
I was gonna say granola bar sounds great.
So this is new. Fun fact: Holiday Inn has started rolling out these like, how like you have like automatic waffle makers, like you press a button and it just like pours the stuff. Yeah. They have that for pancakes. And it's like this like thing, you press a button and then there's like this little contraption that like drops pancake batter on like a conveyor belt. and then it just rolls through the machine, and then like it poops out a pancake at the end.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. The only time I've seen that was London. They had that there.
And it was a terrible pancake. It's like the worst pancake I've ever had in my life.
Right. I didn't even bother with pancakes for sure.
It was if it was made out of rubber, I wouldn't have. It might as well have been. Like I initially didn't grab a knife because I was like, I don't need a knife with pancakes. I'll just cut it with a fork. You are not cutting these pancakes with a plastic fork. Anyway,
too dense.
I do love me a free breakfast though. All right.
Yeah, but you got to have. I mean, I'll deal with the powdered eggs and some crispy bacon, hopefully.
Yeah, I just want it to be hot. Like I do go out of my way to stay at a hotel with free breakfast, and like I know it's not going to be good, but like, and this is, keep in mind, all my meals are comped when I'm traveling for work. Like I still just want it to be free breakfast at the hotel. I don't know why.
No, I know. I totally get that.
I'm also terrible at keeping my receipts, so.
And then you got to wait for the whole system, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So I think we're ready to get going here. Yeah. Whenever you're ready, Steve.
Inside Black and Gold, we are Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak, coming to you with some post Sean Payton news. We are over the watching out for where we're going to see.
Thank God.
What's that?
Thank God.
Yeah, no kidding. It kind of felt like it was carrying on forever, and that there wasn't going to be any kind of hope at this resolving this season. And then whammo, we got hit by the magic Denver Broncos, chiming in. And it really seemed like last minute to swoop in and get Sean, because everybody kept saying the signals were going back to Fox, and that was not good news for the Saints.
Yeah, the crazy part to me is how quickly the news, like usually it'll kind of roll over a couple hours or maybe even a day of like, oh, okay, they're agreeing to this, and then the compensation will come out, and blah blah. This was like from the first tweet from like, I think Adam Schefter tweeted about it first, and then from that point it was like within 15 minutes. It was not only was the deal agreed to, we knew exactly what the draft compensation was going to be. Like,
right.
Like Adam Schefter actually tweeted like, okay, there are two deals the Saints could potentially agree to. One is this, where they get a first round pick this year and this next year, blah, 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 or this. But within 45 seconds, like I barely had time to quote tweet that with I would take this. The Ian Rappaport was tweeting, okay, they've accepted this and blah, 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 to the point that Adam deleted that tweet, which was accurate, I believe. He just was like, this is going to be confusing to people because they've already accepted this deal. So yeah, it was a wild.
Wow, I didn't know he got rid of that.
Hold on. Sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah, it was a wild 25 minutes. And this is the second consecutive year that major coaching news has broken during the second practice of the first day at the Senior Bowl. Last year, it was the Brian Flores lawsuit against the Dolphins.
Okay.
Which in the end was tangentially related to Sean Payton, right? Because it ultimately, that whole process kind of turned into, oh, well, the Dolphins have turned out to be tampering with Sean Payton and Tom Brady and blah, 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 and they lost their pick. And this year, 1 year later, 365 days to 12 hours apart, this happened. But yeah, it was kind of a crazy segment. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about, I want to kind of get into the idea of, did they get enough for Sean Payton? Because that's been the major question I've seen people asking is, why didn't they get more? Should they have held out? Blah, blah, blah. So we're going to get into that. In the second segment, we're going to get into kind of the major coaching changes that we've seen already, most on the defensive side of the ball for the Saints, but they could be coming to the offensive side. I think the question of whether some of these coaches will be targets for Sean on his new staff in Denver, I think that's an interesting thing. So we're going to get into that. And I was able to talk to Ronald Curry at the Senior Bowl. He interviewed with the Bucs while at the Senior Bowl. It's basically a big job fair, apparently. So we'll get into that. And then the final segment will be a mailbag. So get your questions, comments in the feed, and we'll get to as many as we can in the back segment. We're going to try to make this kind of a regular Thursday mailbag during the offseason. So keep that in mind as you're trying to figure out what you're going to do on Thursday afternoons and evenings. You could hang out with us on YouTube.
And just
I
ask
don't
us
know why
questions.
you would. But okay, Steve, I know you have opinions here. What is your take? So
Yeah.
before we kind of go in, I guess we can lay out what they actually did get. So the Saints traded Sean Payton to the Denver Broncos. They got a first round draft pick, which is technically 30th, but it will be the 29th selection. Ironically, because the Dolphins do not have the 21st pick because they tampered with Sean Payton. So the Dolphins tampering with Sean Payton actually slightly improves the compensation the Saints got for trading Sean Payton. So that's kind of interesting. So they got that first round pick. It was the only real first round pick that I think was reasonable to expect in the 2023 draft. Even if you had waited out Arizona, I don't know whether that number 3 would have been on the table. I'd be very surprised if it was. Then Houston obviously went with DeMeco Ryan, so that wasn't there. The Panthers went with Frank Reich, so that wasn't there. Beyond that, the rest of the compensation is the Broncos are sending their 2024 second round pick to the Saints, and the Saints are sending back their 2024 third. So effectively what you did was turn your third round pick into a second round pick next season. And if you recall, the Saints don't have a second round pick next season because they traded that to the Eagles in part as part of the first round draft pick trade this past offseason. So now the Saints have a second, but do not have a third next year. So that's the compensation. So the question is, Steve, do you think the Saints got enough in this deal in trading Sean Payton?
I like the deal, obviously, because it gets this, situation handled this year. We don't have to carry it over into next season. I thought that what the Saints are getting in return for Sean, I'm fine. I just don't like what they're also sending back. I don't like the inclusion of the third rounder. Maybe that's me being a little bit greedy, I guess, but I thought a first and a second is fair compensation, but it's tough when the market out there. There's not real much of a market out there dictating.
There's no market.
What's that?
There's no market. The Broncos are bidding against themselves. So
yeah, I guess you could say, well, the Arizona Cardinals are still a potential suitor, but yeah, it looks like the Colts they never even sniffed around Sean. Houston, yeah, we're expecting them to finally close their deal over there. And, I don't know if Sean wants to wait another year of missing out on that coaching money either, honestly, though.
No, I don't think Sean wanted to go back to Fox. But I do think that it at the end of the day, it didn't necessarily come down to whether Sean wanted to go to A or B. It was like, Sean, are you willing to go to Denver?
Yeah,
because it's not like Arizona was on the table and he got to pick between them. Like Arizona is slow playing their head coaching search and they're still interviewing candidates as far as I know. Like they were just setting up an interview with Mike Kafka, the Giants offense coordinator, earlier this week. So like they're not prepared to start offering candidates. So the question you could ask is why didn't the Saints kind of drag out this process a little longer to allow the Cardinals to potentially drive up that price? But here's the thing.
They must know
the
something.
Broncos. Well, look at how the Broncos have operated throughout this entire head coaching search. Like they have zeroed in on so many different candidates and been rebuffed, struck out, right? Jim Harbaugh was like, no, leave me alone. I'm going back to Michigan. Stop bothering me. Like DeMeco Ryan,
right.
Like they want DeMeco. He wants Houston, and I don't blame him. Like that makes too much sense, right? And so Dan Quinn, they probably wanted Dan Quinn, but he went back to Dallas to be their defensive coordinator, which I think kind of tells you this was not as attractive of a job across the board as some people might have thought it was.
I think that Dan Quinn move that you just mentioned right there kind of sealed the deal on them returning their whole focus, Denver's focus, back to Sean.
I agree.
I thought agree. Quinn was going to be a done deal there.
Yeah, and so I think what happened with Denver is all of a sudden Denver is like, well, we got to do something, right? We are in win now mode. We can't just take the 17th best option on the board and then be able to justify the trade we made to bring in Russell Wilson, right? Like you already did it with Nathaniel Hackett. A guy that no one really believed was this like splash hire, and it didn't work out, right? And so if you go and you do that again, then you're in real rough shape in terms of how you can operate going forward, because you made a win now trade and then you didn't make a win now hire. And so they ended up in a situation where, in order to save face, they had to just give in and make a trade that they probably didn't want to make. They didn't want to give up their first round pick, but they knew that that was the only option, so they did it. And so if you're the Saints, all of a sudden you have a first round pick. And I think whether there was this idea that Mickey Loomis wanted 2 first round picks, I think that's just what you say. That's where you start. That's the negotiating tactic, is you come in higher and so you can settle for lower. And at the end of the day, getting a first round pick for a coach that is not going to coach your team is a win, right? And so that's where you set the bar, in my opinion, is, okay, are we getting a first? Yes. How much can we get past that? And so I based on the kind of offers that they were considering, right, which would have been like, if Adam Schefter's report was accurate, it would have been a third this year and a first next year, versus a first this year and a second next year, where you send back your third. And so I think, like, here's a theoretical, right? So obviously the first is there either way. Would you have preferred a third round pick coming to the Saints and not giving anything back, or a second round pick where you send them your third? I would say the second round pick, because that has a lot more value than the third, in my opinion, from a team that expects to be good, right? The Saints aren't going to go in the tank, so you're not expecting that to be a top third round pick, expecting it to be a mid or worse. So, like, I think that trade value is more significant than having no second and 2/3, personally.
Yeah, I just don't know why the option for getting that second has to include that Saints third round pick. I don't. I thought the Saints would be able to get a first and second at least for Sean without having to throw in any more sweeteners to the deal. But like I said, I understand. I'm thankful for the market for them to even close this right now, and I guess maybe that's part of it as well. There really was there's no other team coming, even though that I forget who was saying there was also some mystery franchise involved somewhere that could, push the needle. Yeah, that was just Sean, like, agent pushing something.
Well, and so, the point I'm kind of getting at is, so, like, how quickly this all came together. And there was reports that it was going on since Monday. Maybe it was, but again, that's just 2 days. That's not that long of a time. And I think if you're the Saints, you're aware that the Broncos are kind of tilting right now. Like, if you give them enough time to talk themselves out of it, this is probably a team and a franchise that's going to do that, based on what we have seen and how quickly they seem to change their mind, right? So for the Saints, I think there's incentive there to just say, okay, I think this is the best we're going to get. Let's move on. And so, like, for example, if this is how the process went, okay, first round pick, how about a second? And they said, we'll give you a third. And the Saints said, how about you give us a second and we'll give you our third? And they were like, yeah, we'll do that. And so at a certain point, the negotiation starts to go backwards.
Right.
And you start negotiating against yourself, and you end up with a worse, you start to make this kind of franchise who is already shown you that they are indecisive. Now they're taking a step back and they're like, I don't know. Like, if you ever try to pull off a fantasy football trade, for example, it's always just like, oh, is it balanced? Is it balanced? Is it even? And then all of a sudden you try to get too much, and then it's like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And then you're not getting it done. It's like, sometimes you just have to hit the button and get it, right? Sometimes you just have to get the deal, and then you worry about it afterward. And I think that's kind of where the Saints were. And so, we talked to Jeff Ireland at the Senior Bowl yesterday, and he didn't seem like, he was like, yeah, we got an extra draft asset. We get to bring in another high quality player. Like, I'm a scouting director. That's what I want. I want an extra first round pick, or I want a first round pick, period, in this draft, so that we can scout players in the first round and potentially get them. Right. And so from a Saints perspective, I think they view it as a win. And I view it as a win, right? Because people can say, wow, they should have played hardball. They should have waited it out. Who knows what the coaching landscape is going to look like next year? Who knows what jobs are going to be available? You are an extra year removed from Sean coaching in the NFL. So who knows what that impacts? Like, sure, maybe the Chargers job is available and they're willing to just bend over backwards to get it done. Maybe it's not. Maybe the Chargers take another step forward and end up in the AFC Championship, and they're not moving on from their head coach, right? Maybe the Cowboys don't move on from Mike McCarthy. Maybe this is the best chance you're going to get a first round pick back. You do not know.
What if Sean now gets the Chargers head coach fired for, like causing them, misery in their conference?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, my point is the longer you wait, the higher the percentage chance is that you risk getting nothing. Right? And if you are the Saints, it is your job to make sure that you are not only maximizing the value, but not losing the value in the process. And I think that's where you ended up. And for this, there is also value baked in here of not having to talk about it anymore, of not having to spend an entire season listening to people speculating and asking you questions about what you're going to do with Sean Payton. It's like, no, okay, book closed. Let's move on.
Huge one right there. And especially for Dennis Allen too.
Yes.
Not to say that, he's that shadow still not there of Sean, you want to say for there in that coaching realm. But for him, it's something that I feel like give me some assets now, at least that I have for this year. That's what I think he really needed out of this, especially after the team obviously gave up their first rounder last season. But to get back into round one this year is huge because they still have some ammunition too, where they can make some moves and plays to go up or down in this draft. I know they typically don't go down.
Yeah, they now have 7 picks, right? They pick 29, they pick 40, and they pick 112. And having 3 picks in the top 115, right? That's quality, and you can bring in quality players. You also have an extra 5th round pick. That high value trade you made for CJ Gardner-Johnson.
Hey, but you know what? At least I look at those late ones too with this team as a positive because they've done pretty decent with some of those mid-round guys. I'm not saying you're 6th, 7th rounders, but a 5th rounder, some of those 3rd round picks that this team has had in the past have really panned out for them.
Problem is, I have no faith that they keep them. Right? Like I still feel like you're going to end up seeing them move up in the 3rd round to try to get somebody. And the question is, I have 2 questions, and one of them is, are you going to go after a quarterback? Right? You know what? I wrote a post yesterday from the Senior Bowl, and it's like your next starting quarterback is not on the field at this event. I think I can say that pretty definitively. Now, there is a guy standing on the sideline who might be your next starting quarterback in Hendon Hooker. I'm not sold on him. I know a lot of people are. I'm not sold on Hendon Hooker. I need to see him work out. I need to I'm not going to go based on what I saw at Tennessee. It was a gimmicky offense, and I know he's a spot thrower. It's an option-based wide receiver offense. I get it. But this is all based around the idea that Pete Carmichael is your offense is going to be that same Pete Carmichael scheme. And, maybe it is this year, but who knows what it's going to be next year. So I don't know if you have that many questions about a guy at the top, I don't know if that's where you go, but who knows? Cat Terrell put together this kind of simulation of how the offseason might play out with all these free agents that she tried desperately to get a quarterback. Derek Carr turned her down. Wait, is it David? Derek? Carr, yeah. Derek Carr turned him down to be a free agent. So Jimmy Garoppolo ended up somewhere else. Like he couldn't do it. And in this simulation, the Saints ended up with Andy Dalton again because that was the best option. So if that's where you end up, if you are unable to swing a trade,
simulation either.
Yeah. If you're unable to swing a trade, if you can't do anything but bring back Andy Dalton, then yeah, okay, fine. I'll get on board with Hendon Hooker. But until you get to that point, I'm still looking at a starting quarterback that you're bringing in ready to go, not a developmental guy in the draft. And if you can go that route, and suddenly at 29 you're able to shore up the interior line, right? At 40 you're able to bring in a running back, right? You're able to get a Tajay Spears, who I desperately want to speak into existence on the Saints. That's what I would like to see. But there's a long way to go. And the fact is, I'm just glad that instead of talking about Sean Payton, we can now talk about mock drafts that are all going to be wrong.
No kidding with that. I see that, people start pumping them out now with the Saints having a 1st round pick again. I'm sure we're going to all have to do that as well, kind of thing. But you know what, with Hooker, obviously the good part about the Senior Bowl access that the Saints have is so great that they, we heard the coaches talk about the intimate setting that you have, and that one-on-one time with the player is really the most important thing. And who knows, maybe, Hooker's a guy that blows them away and gets their curiosity as someone that can lead a franchise. I just don't know if he's there yet. Either kind of thing. I would need to see obviously more from the guy, but put up huge, impressive numbers this past season with Tennessee before getting hurt. There's a number of things too that have to be cleared, obviously with medicals we could talk about, but I don't think that Andy Dalton being the Saints starter week 1 is that much of a crazy thing, especially if you're going to invest in a young quarterback this year, obviously. But if you mentioned like the other route, if you're going to go after a veteran that's maybe been in around the league, you might need to use that first round pick.
Right.
To get someone like a Lamar.
Yeah. And like, even if they can't trade for Derek Carr, maybe they sign him. I don't know. But like, what I don't want to see is Andy Dalton brought back and have him be the starter with no alternative. Like I was talking to Doug Mouton about this from WWL TV, and it's like, if they bring back Andy Dalton, I'm okay with it as long as he is brought back as a bridge, right? Like I am more than fine with Andy Dalton being the bridge, but there has to be someone at the other end of the bridge,
sure,
right? Like it can't just be like, okay, we're just gonna spend another season trying to see if Andy Dalton can do enough, right? Like that's not the future. And whether that's Hendon Hooker, whether that's somebody else, the problem is, the thing is like the guys on the field this week, and like the Saints did have great access, right? DJ Williams was the quarterback's coach. Ronald Curry was an offensive coordinator, but like these guys aren't your starting quarterbacks, right? Jaron Hall, I was not impressed with. Jake Haener, I was not particularly impressed with. Malik Cunningham, Max Duggan, right? The best thing I can say about Max Duggan is he nailed all of his handoffs in the 9-on-7s. Great handoffs to the running backs. Like these are developmental at best. These are guys who their ceiling is backup quarterback, right? And if you are not drafting a quarterback in the first round, you're not trying to find your next starting quarterback. Fact. Like they do not exist outside of the first round, maybe the second round, but even those are rare, right? Like Jalen Hurts, occasionally you'll find these guys, but like even those guys are rare. Like outside of the second round, they basically don't exist, right? Like in the last decade, which doesn't include Russell Wilson, the only starting quarterback, like regular starting quarterback that was selected in the third round or later, Dak Prescott. Brock Purdy, you can claim, obviously, but like, it's a little soon to go all in on him. And again, that's a situation where you have everything around you. It is a perfect situation. If you have a perfect quarterback situation, sure, you can go find a Brock Purdy and plug him in there and maybe he'll be successful. But in 99% of the situations that you end up in, your starting quarterback is found in the first round of a draft.
Yeah, so if you see that guy in this draft, though, I don't know if the Saints can get high enough, if you know what I mean, right. to trade up that high to get one of those type tier QBs. I just don't envision that. If they got the 12th pick from the Houston Texans, maybe.
Well, and that's the other problem. It's like, okay, like, oh, maybe you can swing a trade for Trey Lance. Well, you're not going to be able to do that now because Brock Purdy is dealing with a torn UCL. Like you're not getting that. Like a guy like Jordan Love maybe, but like the Packers, who knows what they're going to do. There's guys to be had, but it's not a very attractive situation.
I'm worried about the Jimmy G scenario. Obviously, I'm not a fan at all, and I don't want to see that come into New Orleans.
No, but that is the next question: is who is going to be the starting quarterback? And thankfully, you now have a first round pick where you can play around with it, and maybe you can move up. Maybe you can go identify somebody and trade for him, but it's not going to be any of those guys at the Senior Bowl unless you want to take a quarterback in the 6th round. So that's all I have to say on that for now.
Yeah, nothing high end there, at least like you said for signal caller wise. But man, there has to be some kind of better answer going into next year, even though for not just the team. I know fans are ready to lose their what. Over
Twitter is so toxic right now.
Oh, it's crazy between the fact of, what's going on with losing the coordinators now, what's happening, the lack, I guess you would say, of compensation people thought was coming for the Sean Payton trade, and just a general outlook of the team has been pretty rough on Twitter. You almost want to stay away from it to keep out of the negativity.
Oh, I agree with that. But all right, let's wrap that segment up. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some of the coaching moves and departures that have happened this week, and maybe some more potential departures. Keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold.
Woohoo.
Oh, hey.
And we're back.
All right. Just a reminder, the last segment after this one is going to be a live mailbag. So get your comments and questions in there. Favorite cats, that sort of thing. What's your favorite snack food? Have you had any good king cakes? I had like a cheese king cake today, which is the first for that.
What's up with running backs, man?
Running backs?
Sorry. Twitter breaking news. Joe Mixon's been issued an arrest warrant on account of aggravated menacing.
Aggravated menacing.
Aggravated menacing.
Does that mean he was just angry? I don't even know what that means. But Joe Mixon isn't exactly a paragon of not being a crazy person, so
yeah, he's got a little bit of a past there.
Yeah. I don't know.
Bit.
But all right. Yeah, if you have any questions you want to get in the mailbag, throw it in the comments now, and we'll get to them in this next segment. But first things first.
Dun, dun, dun.
You ready?
Do it.
All right. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. And we are going to come back and talk about all of the people who are not here anymore. RIP. No, just kidding. They're alive. They're just not alive with the Saints. And yeah, it's been, it's like the second you got to Mobile, all of a sudden, all the shoes started dropping, right? Ryan Nielsen ended up in Atlanta as the Falcons offensive coordinator. Chris Richard is now no longer on the Saints. They parted ways. It sounds like there was creative differences there. Let's put it that way. We've already lost Dan Roshar as the tight ends coach and the run game coordinator. And Ronald Curry got an interview with the Bucs for their vacant offensive coordinator role. And so you don't know what happened there. So at this point, the Saints are interviewing for defensive coordinators. They interviewed Joe Woods, who was the Browns defensive coordinator the last 3 seasons. He was on Dennis Allen's staff in 2014 back with the Raiders. So who knows? But it sounds like they're going to have to hire at least 4 coaches. You're going to have to hire a tight ends coach. You're going to have to hire a defensive coordinator, assuming that the defensive coordinator is not pulling double duty, like the way that Ryan Nielsen and Chris Richard coached the defensive line in the secondary, because now you're going to probably hire a defensive line coach, or maybe shift Michael Hodges from linebackers to D-line and hire a linebackers coach, one of those 2 things. And then you're probably going to have to hire a secondary coach. So 1 year removed from the buzzword being continuity, There's a lot of coaching changes that are going to be happening, and none of the coaching changes that I think most people on Twitter would have wanted.
The biggest question to me, honestly, Jeff, is the fact what came up with Richard. They're talking about the creative differences, or however you want to put it. With suddenly now with the belief of the scheme or how things are run within the defense, just seems kind of odd to me.
Yeah, I would have.
Especially, I thought Richard would be a guy that might get promoted to that sole DC spot, which, with Nielsen out the picture, the co-defensive coordinator would now take over as a full-time gig, but that just obviously wasn't in the cards.
Yeah, I expect to hear updates not too far down the road on Richard. I don't think that it was just a straightforward, like, we're going to move on, right? Because you wanted to keep that guy in the building. I think I would be very surprised if it was just like, oh yeah, we want to go a different route with our secondary. Secondary has been very good the last few seasons. The evaluations, the development have all been very good. So that's a strange thing to me. And, we were talking a bit about this, and this is completely hypothetical, but, like, for example, Sean Payton wanted Vic Fangio as his defensive coordinator. Suddenly Vic Fangio was the defensive coordinator with the Dolphins. Is the ink dry? You know what I mean? Like, is there going to be a situation where maybe Vic Fangio can back out and go hang out with Sean, and Chris Richard was one of the candidates for the Dolphins? Maybe that's kind of what's happening. And, the Saints want to get a head start on interviewing. So they're like, okay, we're going to move on. And then it's just going to be some hurdles to clear before Richard can get announced somewhere else. Maybe, again, that is just a theory. But, like, when you see something like this and it's kind of weird and there's unanswered questions, it kind of leads you to believe there's some, other shoes that are about to drop somewhere else. Maybe Chris is like, hey, I'm going to go with Sean. I'm going to be his defensive coordinator. And, you have to wait for his hiring to be made official before you can start doing that. I don't think technically they could do that because they would have to do the interview process first either way. But I have a feeling there's going to be more coming out in terms of, like, there's a job already lined up for Chris.
On another question, you're bringing up Peyton and when he starts really getting his staff together, will he come calling back to New Orleans to pick up some of the guys he's more familiar with? I think it seems obvious, but I don't know is there going to be any kind of understanding, like, Sean, you can't just come here and just take away everything, or take away a good chunk of Dennis Allen's staff now.
Well, you can't hire people in lateral moves. Like, the Saints couldn't block those, and Mickey already said they will. So, like, for example, you couldn't hire Ronald Curry as your quarterback's coach in Denver, right? You couldn't hire him in that type of assistant role, but you could hire him as an offensive coordinator. Right. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind.
So technically, Sean can't have Pete Carmichael.
No, but we were talking about this off air. So, like, I do think it is an interesting question whether Pete wants to go coach with Sean, because while the Saints could technically block that move, do you really want to hold somebody hostage? Right? Like, is that going to benefit you? I don't know. So, like, if Pete came and said, hey guys, would you mind? Because he can't just leave, right? He can't just quit. That would be breach of contract. You could get sued. But, if he goes to Mickey and he's like, guys, I really don't want to be here. I'd rather be in Denver. Would the Saints hold him hostage and expect him to do a good job? Right? Like, that's the thing. It's like, you don't only want this guy here, you want him to be working hard and doing a good job, and holding somebody hostage is not exactly a good way to do that. So that'll be an interesting bridge to cross when you get that far. But I also don't think that Sean just wants to, like, bring his whole staff over to Denver either. I don't think that's the way he wants to build it. Like, he wanted Vic Fangio, right? Like, yeah. He wasn't just saying, like, oh, I desperately want this guy and this guy and this guy. And I think Sean already has a short list of names that he's going to go after. But, from the offensive staff perspective, it is interesting because I don't want to see Ronald Curry leave, personally. I think Ronald Curry is a very good coach, and the Saints should be looking for ways to incorporate him more in a more significant role, not finding ways to convince him he has to leave to get further in his career. And that's what would frustrate me is if they are dedicated to Pete Carmichael, and then because of that, they lose Ronald Curry.
Well, I mean, he's no secret. We obviously know that he's interviewed for a coordinator gig already, and that was just number one. Obviously, there's going to be other suitors in the future. I don't think anything else is lined up currently for him, though.
No, and he did. We did talk to him yesterday, and he told us he had multiple interviews last year as well, which I don't think was reported. But there's the whole Rooney Rule thing. So I think one of the issues with the Rooney Rule is teams will just give you throwaway interviews because they need to satisfy that, and they don't actually intend to hire you. And so, like, that's when you see interviews, and he's like, he didn't even get reported. Like, there were no headlines saying, "Oh, so and so team is interviewing Ronald Curry." That's what you start to ask questions about, and it's like, so why was his interview for offensive coordinator announced by the Bucs, right? Well, they need to make sure everyone knows that they satisfied that requirement, so no one asks questions about it, right? Why is the Saints interview of what's his name, Joe Woods, the first one that gets leaked? Well, whether you intend to hire that guy or not, I think a lot of teams are aware that they want it made perfectly clear that they are satisfying this requirement because they don't want to show up in a lawsuit. But at the end of the day, I do think there's a question to be asked about whether giving minority candidates nominal interviews is actually solving any problems, because I don't know if it actually is.
Well, I mean, look at the numbers around the league, and I think it'll tell you it's not really working.
No. But then, and the other question was like, okay, if Chris Richard did actually, it wouldn't matter with Chris Richard now because they did move on. So it wouldn't even be a question. But so if Ronald Curry got hired as an offensive coordinator, would the Saints get comp picks? And from my understanding of the rules, they would not. Like, that's only head coaches and GMs, which right. Kerry Fontenot got hired by the Falcons. And so the Saints got 2 third-round picks over 2 drafts. That would not be the case with offensive coordinators, from my understanding.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, that's a compensatory pick. It's not like the other team is forced to give up their draft pick to the other team, right?
Yeah, it's just a comp pick. It's the same like if so-and-so left in free agency, and like the Saints, I think, will end up getting a 7th-round comp pick this year for some of the free agents that left. But they won't get a 3rd-round pick like I think a lot of people would have expected after you lose Teron Armstead and Marcus Williams on these big deals. Those are offset by Marcus May and Andy Dalton. As frustrating as that is. Like, you lose these like Pro Bowl caliber players and replace them with Andy Dalton and Marcus May, and you don't get a comp pick, which is strange. But
I know Teron had a rough year in Miami. I mean, dealing with injuries.
Part of the reason you let him go. But here, let's listen to Ronald Curry. We talked to him yesterday, and I thought he had a lot of interesting things to say about getting the interview with Tampa, coaching at the Senior Bowl and whatnot. So here's that interview.
Guys that are, they still got a lot of development to do. So we getting that, just being able to put in a system that a lot of these guys didn't hear, but they will hear one day, and fine tuning it, and then being able to be just a leader of men. So it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's really what I signed up for.
What did you think when you heard the Sean Payton news yesterday?
I mean, we knew he was going somewhere, so I'm happy for him. I mean, he's a great dude, great coach. I mean, Denver got a great one, but we look forward to playing him in 2024. So he's going to do well. I mean, he's a stud, man. Just wish him the best.
Do you think of like him and Russell, what you saw him and Drew here, what he could potentially do there?
I'm trying to get our quarterback situation, So I look forward to working with Jameis and Andy and the guys that we got there. So. That relationship I'm sure it's going to be great. So I wasn't here when Drew first got here. I watched from afar like everybody else. But, Sean is one of the best to ever do it. So whoever his quarterback is, I'm pretty sure he's going to find production out of him.
What does this experience? Sorry, go ahead.
What does this experience mean as far as, or being here mean as far as getting experience to maybe move up to the next level? Not just for you, but other assistants too.
It's like, I wouldn't say it's not experience. It's just really showing people that you can do it. I mean, I feel like I'm more than capable to go out here and call plays on Sunday. I've been in the game for 11 years. I played for 8 years, so I've been around some great coaches, some different systems, and I feel like I learned a lot along the way. So it's really just showing people that I can handle myself as an offensive coordinator, and the experience is great. But I feel like it's just really proving to them that it's something I'm capable of doing more than like the experience of doing it.
Is it kind of like a job fair being here?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Is it kind of like a job fair being here, being able to show what you can do?
I don't look at it as a job fair like I'm auditioning for other teams. I love being a New Orleans Saints, and I didn't look at it like if I come out here, teams will see what I'm able to do. It just, just the question that was posed, like, is it experience or not? I just feel like it's just a way of proving that I'm more than capable of doing the job. But I'm not auditioning for any teams. I love the job I got. Obviously, I want to be a coordinator in this game one day, and I feel like that time will come when the time is right.
Getting the call from Tampa, is that like sort of the next step when you start getting those kind of calls?
Yeah, when you go on interviews, it's awesome. I had a couple last year, and then this one this year, and there's a lot of jobs out there, and you sit back and you look at some of the guys that's getting interviewed, and just like anybody that's competitive, you just want a shot to go out there and show what you can do. So I mean, I'm happy that Tampa called and kind of got the ball rolling. I think the interview went great, so just look forward to hearing from them one way or another.
So yeah, that's Ronald Curry. We don't get a lot of chances to talk to Ronald Curry, and that's only part of the interview. I also asked him, what kind of was the major difference this year when you kind of went from Sean Payton to Pete Carmichael. And he said there really wasn't that much of a difference because the way the Saints operated in the preseason was Pete Carmichael ran the show and he called the plays in the preseason. And then you got to the regular season, and that's when Sean kind of took over from an offensive perspective. And this year it was basically like, okay, you got through the preseason and then you just kept doing that. And all these coaches had been together for so long that it really wasn't that much of a change. He was also asked, whether he feels like he expects to be kind of more integrated into the play calling. He said no, he doesn't expect that. He got to call plays in the Green Bay preseason game last year, and he said that he kind of expects another game like that, maybe more preseason action. But, from the perspective of maybe they shift play calling and put him in that role, it doesn't sound like he's expecting that. Whether that could still happen, I don't know. I hope it does, because I would like to see him get a better chance to lead that offense, because I think that he is a very underutilized commodity on this team. Yeah.
I just think maybe a little too soon for Curry still to take over as a play caller. Keep getting some more experience, I guess, with those preseason games. I know that he's gonna the Saints need an injection though of some kind of more creativity, and I just haven't seen that at all. The last year's offense was tough to watch, obviously, and you can't really know how much was dictated because of quarterback play and how much was also because of the play calling.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess at what point are you ready? Like, I don't know. Like, he's 43 years old. He's been a coach for a decade. He played for 8 years. Like, at a certain point, you just give somebody an opportunity and see what they have, right? And so,
but they made it clear they're not moving on from Pete.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, they didn't make that clear.
I guess so, right?
Like, it's not like they came out and announced that. Like, that was reporting. That was from Mike Triplett initially, and I think, they didn't deny it. But, like, it's not like they came out and said, we are committed to doing this exactly the same way we did last year. All that we know is they're not firing Pete Carmichael. That doesn't mean they're not going to change things. He was the pass game coordinator last year. That was a new thing for Ronald. And maybe they'll add more to his play. I'm not saying they're going to make him the primary play caller. I'm just saying, like, you don't want to just lose the coaches that you've developed, right? There were 4 coaches out at the Senior Bowl practices. I talked to 3 of them. I talked to DJ. I talked to Declan Doyle, and the other one was Corey Robinson. I didn't get the chance to talk to him, but all of these guys, this is an opportunity to really kind of prove they can do the things that they already know they can do, just haven't got a chance to yet. So, hopefully this is something that the Saints look at as kind of a stepping off point for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, you definitely want to develop these guys, and like you said, keep them. But it's a business though too, where it's a lot of who kind of deal, and later on, if somebody moves on from the Saints organization, it's all about obviously the networking and just getting to know more of the other coaches around with you. And the Saints just seem to take prime. Really take advantage of the use of the Senior Bowl to its max, not just from scouting players, but even developing their coaches with the situations there of interviewing the players, of getting to do more stuff on the field, and getting to learn from these, get to know these players on a more intimate level, get to know them more personally is huge when it comes down to the line for the future as well.
Yeah, and I think that is a big part of this is, normally at the Senior Bowl, you get like 15 minutes to kind of sit with the players, and you don't really have a ton of time to get a good picture. But no, these guys are on the field with them all week. They're in the meeting rooms with them. They're installing offense and defense. And, that's a big advantage that I think the Saints were thrilled to take advantage of. And I think that because they told us that over and over again. And I believe it, right? So here's one of the things that, we asked Jeff Ireland, like what traits he's looking for in players. And I thought his answer was interesting.
Self-awareness, where they are in the world, I mean, intelligence. Those are probably the two most important things we're looking at. Just again, we're getting 15 minutes with them. Sometimes I call it the speed dating rounds. You get 4 at a time, and you got to really kind of get in there and ask these questions, and then they're on to the next date. So, but those are two things that we're looking for.
Yeah, so self-awareness and intelligence, right? So I think a lot of times people get caught up in like, oh, this guy looks fantastic on the field, like he's this 1% athlete, right? And while that's necessary, that's pretty much true of everybody that's going into the NFL. Is they're 1% athletes and they can make spectacular things happen. But what separates an NFL player from a college player a lot of the time is processing speed, is understanding what's happening and understanding how to improve and what the other team is trying to do against you. And that's not something you can always project, right? A lot of these offenses they're running in college and a lot of the defenses you're running in college are very simple. They are not the type of schemes you're going to see in the NFL. So you have to kind of project how players can get to that next level. And I think self-awareness is a really interesting answer in that, like, what does that mean from a coaching perspective? Like it's like, how do you find that in a player? And it's like, you can't fake self-awareness. It's like inherently you can't fake it. Like you either have it or you don't, because if you don't have it, you are not aware that you don't have it. And it's kind of a funny thing to look for in a prospect. And like, I think that's why when you ask, why are the Saints so invested in this process? That's why, because that's what they're looking for in players, not just 40 times and, like broad jump scores and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And just the more time spent on the field with these guys, you get a taste of their football IQ. And the Saints are obviously looking for dialed in smart players, guys that can handle their playbook.
Yeah, and that's not true of just the Saints, right?
No, right, exactly.
That's but it is, like, I think the teams that are the most consistent and in finding quality players, not necessarily the top 10 picks, not these like, oh man, you got Tom Brady in the 6th round. Like those are rare to the point that if you're looking for them, you are wasting your time and you are missing the players that are actually going to be the core of your roster, right? One of the reasons I think the Saints like the Senior Bowl is because they're more worried about building quality depth than, dart throws of like, oh, well, this guy, he has these 1 or 2 traits. We don't like this and this, but we're going to ignore that and draft him anyway. Like they want to find the players that fit the scheme, that fit the team, so that your roster from top to bottom is quality. right? You don't win a Super Bowl because your 3 best players are stars and then the next 50 are okay. Like you win because 1 through 53 is above a baseline. And sure, if you have those 3 stars, if you have a Pat Mahomes, right? If you have these guys who help elevate you, that's great. That makes you from a contender to a Super Bowl favorite. But you have to be a contender before you can get to that level. And that's what you get from these type of scouting events.
Yeah, and I wish the Saints found more Cam Jordans at defensive end than your Marcus Davenports and your Peyton Turner. Sorry, I know it's maybe a little too early still on Turner, but I think we made the joke, or I made the joke on a previous podcast that those guys are never going to total Cam Jordan. They'll never be able to match his total games played.
All 3 Senior Bowl guys.
No, right, exactly. Yes.
So one of the questions that Jeff Ireland was asked was like, is Peyton Turner, what's holding him back? And he actually gave a pretty frank answer of like,
Absolutely.
yeah, he's got a hump to get over. He mentioned his weight. He mentioned, coming into camp in shape, which, it's interesting. And you do have to give Peyton the benefit of the doubt of like, he was dealing with a surgery last offseason. It probably limited what he was able to do. But like when you're getting called out for, your weight and your motivation, it's not a great sign. So hopefully that's something that as you go forward, you're going to get a new defensive line coach. Maybe that can help spur him. But like, that's not the type of answer you typically hear about a young player. You're usually getting the kind of PR like, oh, we love this guy. He works hard, blah, blah, blah. Like, so because everything you're hearing there is magnified times 10 just because of the fact that he's willing to say it in public.
Well, I think too,
right?
And the way Jeff Ireland said it though was kind of like it came across as very aggravated. Obviously,
I think they are frustrated. I think this team is frustrated because you spent a 1st-round pick on a guy and you have not got a first-round production out of him. Now, you asked about Trevor Penning, a guy who only played in 3 games, right? Or however many it was, and he got a glowing review. Like it was like every game he was out there, he was better than the one he was before. We kept giving him more and more and he kept picking it up and improving. And like, that's what you're used to hearing. So like to hear Peyton get that type of review, I think it's like, this is a kind of make or break off season for him. Yeah. I think that's really what you're looking at here is like, okay, Peyton, like, the gloves are off. It is time to either put up or shut up. And like, he's like, yeah, the athlete's still there. The guy that we drafted is still there. We just have to see it. I thought that was a really interesting answer. And it's like, yeah, like this is the year 3 for a rookie, a 1st-round pick. It's like, if you're not productive, if you are not a starter and forced, like this is a guy he was a healthy scratch last year in several games. It's a 1st-round pick, guys. That does not happen for 1st-round picks. So, you got to see something from him. And hopefully you do. Hopefully, like, that's the thing. It's like, you don't say that about a guy because you don't care. You say that about a guy because you know that he has the ability to be an impact player. And for reasons that you can identify, he has not been able to do that. And part of that is health, but a lot of it's not health. A lot of it is doing the stuff you need to do as a pro. And so, like, I think that's something that you look at this offseason and you're like, okay, can he be a 1st-round pick quality player? This is where you start.
Yeah, and I think you saw it, I saw it. Obviously, the coaches saw it. The fact that an undrafted guy who's been around for a little bit now with Carl Granderson was definitely outplaying Turner, and there was just nothing Turner was doing was able to get him on the field, even though you felt like he should be able to, obviously, but there were other guys on that defensive line that were impeding that, if you could say. And to me, when you look at the numbers from the D line, that shouldn't be the case either.
Yeah, I mean, week 18, you were eliminated. And that still wasn't like, okay, give Peyton Turner as many snaps as he can handle,
right,
and see what he can do. Like that's the point that you were at in that season with him, where you didn't even like that wasn't even like the thought process there. Like I don't even know if he was active for that game. Like that's just not a good look. And I think there's I'm sure he was frustrated, and maybe when you swap out a new defensive line coach, maybe you can get a little more out of him. I think that should be a priority.
There you go.
In terms of who you hire.
Maybe there's that kind of positive right there. There was some kind of he didn't get along with Nielsen, and hopefully the new defensive line coach can bring something out of Turner. But I got to tell you, I'm a huge Nielsen fan, and I think just losing him hurts the team just for his fire, his passion, and what he brings and that aggressive attacking nature to this defense. I think will definitely be missed. But yeah, I'm it's going to take a while. It's going to take a lot for you to sell me on Peyton Turner going into training camp this year.
I agree with that. I think Nielsen has been a good coach. What I would say is he has not, his recent track record of developing young players, particularly the 2 first-round picks in Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner,
Right.
has not been great. You know, he did
Agreed.
great work with Trey Hendrickson. He did great work with Carl Granderson, but these are not top-end athletes. These are not the guys you're drafting with the hope that they are anchoring your defense. Like, so, you know, like there's got to be a point there where you fix that. And so, you know, maybe the guy you bring in is going to be someone who has a track record of developing these, you know, high end picks. Because that's the frustration point for me. It's like you have spent a lot of draft capital on one guy who, you know, maybe you bring him back in Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner, a guy who you weren't even playing last year in year 2. Like, that's not good. Like the things you could have done with those picks, right? With 3 first-round picks and the production you have gotten out of them last year. Like that's the value of 3 first-round picks. You got 2.5 sacks out of those 3 first-round picks. You didn't even get 1 sack per first-round pick that you used to bring in Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner. Like, that's not good. And so, you know, I like Ryan Nielsen a lot. I think he's a good head coach, but I don't know if he necessarily was getting the job done in that department.
I feel you on that. I just, to me, what's frustrating too, you talk about with Peyton Turner, Marcus Davenport, they're almost like the same type of player, unfortunately. And
They're clones of each other.
Yeah, you got the biggest problem with both of them is number one, every time it's like, are they on the field?
Yeah.
And now the problem, even with Peyton Turner, the dude's healthy and just still not getting it done. So that's a huge concern for me, obviously.
I agree. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. My name's Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave us a rating, leave us a review. Steve, I don't know if you heard the last podcast, we got 3 5-star ratings after my rant about 1-star ratings.
There you go. You're getting the job done.
They're encouraging me to be a whiny bitch.
And please, sir, give us those 5 stars.
There it is. All right. Stick around on Inside Black and Gold. We're going to hit that live mailbag, and this is going to be a slightly longer break as I star all of your questions. All right. Stick around, y'all. All right. Steve left. Quick, while he's gone, tell me what you really think of Steve. While we're waiting, throw your questions in there. What position do y'all think the Saints should draft at number 29? That's my question. I don't think they should draft a quarterback, personally, because I don't think there will be a quarterback there to draft unless you're taking Hendon Hooker, which I don't know. Not a I think Steve's coming back.
Oh, I thought you said it was a longer break than usual.
It was. Lazy bones.
I had to refill.
Refill of what?
Jameson and ginger.
Jeez, you lush. I made it through my entire trip to Mobile without drinking. I think I should get an award.
Yeah, how'd you survive that?
I went to sleep. That's been my goal of my last few trips is like I have this thing where I'm like in a hotel room and I'm like bored. I'm like, well, I guess I should go do something. And I'm like, wait, but I could just go to sleep instead. And then I do. And then I wake up in the morning. I'm like, wow, this was nice. I should have done this. I should do this more often.
It's amazing what sleep does.
Yeah. And then I get to the field and I hear like a bunch of people in the stands being like, oh, I'm so hungover. This is miserable. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of nice.
Right.
Although I did get like you can't really see it. It's kind of faded, but I did get a sunburn on Tuesday. It was hot. It was like 73 degrees and muggy. And I was like, it's February. It's like, no, it's January. Yeah,
that's the great part about Mobile. They're in January for sure.
All right. So I have one here. Okay. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. We're going to hit our Thursday live mailbag. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we will continue to yell at you through your screens as I assume you all enjoy because you're here. Here's one from Don Tomasino, a guy after my own heart. Says the Saints haven't gotten any good players from the Senior Bowl. It's almost like he did not watch our last video where I spent like 45 minutes talking about all the players the Saints have gotten out of the Senior Bowl. But we can go through the list again right here. Not the entire list, but just a few of them, just the good picks.
Yeah,
so,
give them the good ones.
Yeah, so last year you had Trevor Penning and Alontae Taylor. I think the jury's still out on both of those guys, but I feel good about them. 2019, you had Eric McCoy. 2016, you had Sheldon Rankins. 2013, you had Teron Armstead. 2011, you had Cam Jordan. 2010, you had Patrick Robinson and Jimmy Graham. 2009, you had Thomas Morstead. 2008, you had Tracy Porter and Carl Nix. 2006, you had Roman Harper. 2004, you had Devery Henderson. 2003, John Stinchcomb. That's probably, the list of like really good players that you got. That's pretty good. That's more than
what's his name?
Goldilocks.
The linebacker was pretty good. He was at the Senior Bowl, right?
Alex Anzalone.
Yeah, he wasn't terrible.
He's fine. I would say he's below the bar of the players that I mentioned, right? Like there's a lot of decent players on there that I did not mention. Those are just the really good players. And so, I mean, that's probably 10, 12, so I think the saying they haven't gotten any good players from the Senior Bowl. I mean, Cam Jordan's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion.
Easily. Right.
He's one of the best players in Saints history.
I mean, to Don Tomasino's credit, I feel there have been way too many flubs than there should have been, I guess.
Well, they definitely missed.
We were just bitching about Peyton Turner.
Right, like Peyton Turner, Marcus Davenport, Stephon Anthony, Stanley Jean-Baptiste. Like they have bad players at the Senior Bowl too. But I mean, you'll draft bad players regardless of whether they're at the Senior Bowl or not. Like it's like you have plenty of bad players and like bad draft picks out there to worry about.
Yes, every time you say that, I hear that Stanley Jean-Baptiste, and I'm like, oh dear Lord. You know what? That kind of actually going back to now with Peyton Turner, that worries me at least with him too. It's like Baptiste could not even get on special teams. Turner, he's not doing that either.
Yeah, and it's a bad look that both, like, I would argue that Marcus Davenport's biggest issue is mental.
Absolutely.
Right? And we talked about how, like, you spend all this time trying to, like, go under the hood and figure out which players kind of stand out from a mental perspective, and then you end up with 2 first-round picks out of this scouting event where you're talking about one of these big deals is, oh, we get all this time to, like, learn about these players, and then you end up with issues that are purely non-physical. Well, at least that's true with Marcus, I think. Like with Peyton, I think that there are physical issues as well. But yeah, it's
we've seen Davenport at least dominate physically.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say that, right? Like that's why I say that his issues are not physical, because we have seen him be an elite pass rusher. You know, it was the year that he couldn't stay on the field for a lot of the games, but you know, he led the team in sacks in the games he played. Do you think he had 12, 13? And so, like, yeah, that's why you can say with him, it is not a physical limitation. With Peyton, I don't know, because we haven't seen either. But when you hear Jeff Ireland come out and give the very blunt assessment of his performance and what he has to do, it kind of indicates that, you know, there's a little bit of both going on.
Job opening.
Sean Sessions says, we're free falling. Woo! You know, I'm not going to lie. So when I was talking to Ross Jackson about this, and he is very strong supporter of drafting Hendon Hooker at number 40. And I understand why, I get it. But one of my questions is, so if the reason you are so confident about Hendon Hooker is that he fits perfectly in the Pete Carmichael offense, right? And you really like what he brings. Well, what happens, for example, if the Saints go 3-14 next year, which I don't expect, but I also don't see as out of the realm of possibility. And then you clean house from a coaching staff perspective, and you bring in a new offensive coordinator who is not Pete Carmichael and is going to revamp some of the things you're doing. Do you just throw Hendon Hooker into that offense? Because I do think that he is a quarterback who makes sense in certain situations, but does not make sense everywhere. So, like, are you not preparing for that eventuality? I don't know if you can. Like, I don't think you can make decisions based on, well, what if we're the worst team in the NFL? But I also don't think that you can make all of your decisions based on, okay, we're going to have this coaching staff for the next 10 years, because what we've seen thus far is not particularly encouraging.
No, and they had a real chance to go on a huge high, obviously, and pulled the rug out from all of us after getting our hopes up in that finale against Carolina, because, man, that was just some god-awful football we watched.
I was not ever going to be on a high, whether they won that game or not. Don't speak for me, sir.
There's that little bit of a boost. At least you had that win streak. You know,
I would have preferred to not watch that game at all.
No, we would have been better off not watching it, for sure.
I knew, and the reason I would have preferred is because I knew it was going to look like that. Anyway, Vincent P., are we tanking early? See, I don't think that, like it might sound like, based on what I said, that, like, I do think that maybe that's what's going on. I don't think that's what's going on. Like, I don't think this team is going to actively subvert their own chances to win.
Dennis Allen heading into year 2, I'm gonna tank.
No, like that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think that this team would actively do that, but it might be out of your control, and you have to at least be prepared for the possibility that this just goes down in flames, right? And so, if you're basing your draft pick around, this is the guy that I want to pair with Pete Carmichael for the next 5 years, it might not be the best draft strategy. I'm just being honest. And I told that to Ross, and he was like, you know what? That's a good point. I think he's still all in on Hendon Hooker, but, like, I do think that it's a question you need to seriously ask yourself. The problem, you can't ask that internally, because you can't go to a head coach and be like, should we really draft this guy if you're going to get fired next year?
No, and with Vincent, I understand too. It's like you see all of a sudden now losing these defensive pieces on the coaching staff. when the defense was one of the brighter spots, obviously, this past season. But to me, even with them being both, the two co-coordinators, defensive coordinators, and what they also brought to their position group, you still had Dennis Allen calling the plays of that team. So I think you'll feel more on the defensive line and the secondary, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if I have concerns going forward, one of them is, it's not a good look when both of your co-defensive coordinators are just like getting out of town as quickly as possible. Like that's not a good look. And I think one of the reasons head coaching tenures fail, beyond just not being a good head coach, is not understanding how to delegate and not empowering the people who work for you that you have hired with the understanding that they can get the job done. And then that's when you lose quality coaches, right? Like these are guys who I think felt like they deserved a bigger role and they didn't get it. And it's frustrating to me when you see a coach that I would argue is a very good defensive coordinator, but doesn't do a lot of the head coach things well. It's like, why aren't you focusing on the head coach things? Like, if you want to be a defensive coordinator, right? Like, I don't think that Sean Payton succeeded as a offensive-minded head coach by stepping on the toes of all of the people he hired to do their jobs. But I do think that's how you fail as a head coach. And so that's what I'd be worried about. But that said, like, I'm not going to overvalue what happened with Ryan and what happened with Chris, because this wasn't necessarily the design of Dennis as a head coach, right? Like, look at, for example, and this is maybe an unfair example, but it's an example. Look at the first year under Ed Orgeron with LSU. And he was kind of forced into the Matt Canada situation. And there was this idea that, well, we're not paying Ed that much, so we're going to hire these high price coordinators regardless of whether they make sense. Well, it didn't really work. The next year, you kind of let Ed build his own staff. And suddenly you ended up with Joe Brady and Steve Ensminger and Dave Aranda. And that was like the best college football team of all time, right? All those guys left. And then you kind of got stuck with this situation again. Ed tried to hire Ryan Nielsen. Sean talked him out of it. Did him a favor, I would argue, because like, where's Jake Peets now, right? Like the coordinators on that team, Durante Jones is back coaching defensive backs with the Vikings, right? So like, there are situations where as a coach, you can succeed by empowering people, but you have to be willing to do that, and you have to be confident in those people. If DA is able to bring in a defensive coordinator that he's very confident in and he works well with, then maybe it's a net positive. But it's just not a good look when guys are just running out of town.
I just thought it was odd. I understand, even with, Nielsen going on, finally getting to run his own defense kind of deal, leaving, a little bit behind in New Orleans for a new challenge kind of thing. But what just led me to think that Richard would be considered as the full-time DC then, and it just was weird that there seemed to be this falling out of scheme or not belief in the same direction kind of deal. And I'm just curious more about what fell apart with Richard at the end there.
Yeah, right. And I know Nick Underhill had a report that like they weren't necessarily seeing eye to eye in a lot of these situations, and it's weird because Dennis hired Chris as to be a secondary coach, right? Like it's not like Sean was building that defensive staff. Like DA was building his own defensive staff, and it's strange because like as long as Dennis was there, you knew you weren't going to become the defensive coordinator. It's weird. It's a weird situation. It is frustrating because the defense was not an issue with this team. Although, we can say that and look at kind of the overall season they had. They did struggle early in the year. They did start really slow.
Yep.
And, part of that, it's hard to hold it too much against the secondary, especially when you played 10 games without Marshawn Lattimore and you saw how different things looked when he came back in week 17, right? And so I don't know. It's hopefully that whoever they bring in, Chris was only there for 2 years. It's not like he built that entire. It's not like he developed Marshawn and built that entire secondary. Like it was Aaron Glenn until Chris Richard took over in 2021. So it's I'm more curious as to how things change from a defensive line standpoint than a secondary standpoint. Here's Walt Crawford. Go ahead.
Is that a position they find in-house?
That I'm not sure about, but if you do hire Joe Woods, he is kind of a secondary coach by trade, so maybe he has a big hand in kind of leading that group.
Oh, I thought you meant D-line. D-line, I was saying, I wonder if you find someone in-house.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if you have anyone that necessarily makes sense, right? Like, you don't really have a kind of D-line coach waiting in the wings per se, but maybe Michael Hodges is a guy you move over. I think that'll
be curious.
Yeah, because I think they really like Michael Hodges, and I think D-line is kind of a more high cachet role than linebackers coach for some reason. I don't know why it is, but it seems like that. Here's Walt Crawford. We should sign Baker Mayfield instead of Andy Dalton. We still need to draft a quarterback. I mean, sure. One way or another, you're talking about a 1-year, $10 million deal, right? Like you're signing a bridge, which it's weird to say that Baker Mayfield is a bridge considering he's 26 years old. But I think that is what he is. Actually, how old is Baker? Is he 28?
He's still young enough, for sure, to be considered amongst the younger guns. How old is he?
27. I think he is a guy that you could. So you'd sign Andy Dalton, and the reason that I almost prefer Andy Dalton in this scenario is if you are signing him to be a bridge, you want him to be a bridge. And there will never be any question as to whether you should move on from Andy Dalton at whatever point your rookie quarterback's ready. With Baker, I think there is more gray area, the same way there would be with Jameis. If you signed him and then you were like, well, he's playing really well, but we drafted this rookie that we intend to start. What do we do now? And it's like, but at the same time, the ceiling is not that high where you're like, well, we can it's not like Aaron Rodgers versus Jordan Love, right? Where you're like, okay, fine, we can just bail on Jordan Love because Aaron Rodgers is still playing at an MVP level. With Baker, you're talking about a guy who at his peak is like maybe a fringe playoff quarterback, just like Andy Dalton. So yeah. But if you're not signing him to be a bridge, right? Like I would rather you sign Baker with the upside that he does have as a 27-year-old rather than Andy with no one learning behind him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I just worry with Baker though too. It's like how many teams is he going through, and is a guy I just don't consider him on the upper crust of not just your quarterback, just as accurate and overall. I don't have a problem with the attitude. I just think the output doesn't match the attitude. What I'm saying there, he's not the guy that should be getting all the commercials and getting all these headlines. I just think he's a less than average quarterback, honestly, in the league.
See, I don't know about that. Like, I think he is you don't get drafted number one by accident. I think it's a mental thing with him. I think it's a leadership thing. It's the same reason Zach Wilson is struggling. It's like you have all the intangibles as a quarterback, but you don't have the mental fortitude to lead a team. And, maybe that is something you can rehabilitate with Baker. Maybe he should stop being in as many commercials and, maybe he should focus on being a quarterback.
Pete Carmichael's going to rehab that out of Baker?
No, I'm not saying he would. I'm just saying, like, from a upside perspective, if you are signing someone not to be a bridge and you are choosing between Andy Dalton and Baker, I would go with Baker. But that's just because, like, he has a little more excitement to his game. I thought he actually played pretty well for the Rams, right? Maybe he has been humbled, right? Maybe that is something that's happened. The same way Geno Smith, right? Kind of got flaked around everywhere, and then suddenly it was like, okay, I'm just going to settle in and learn how to be a winning quarterback. Remember Geno Smith got punched in the face by a teammate and broke his jaw, right? That was right? Geno Smith early in his career. Now Geno Smith is this mature quarterback who is just playing to his ceiling, And his ceiling is good enough to maybe not be a superstar, but to be a winning NFL quarterback. Maybe Baker can do that. Hell, maybe Jameis can do that. The problem is I think the bridge is burned with Jameis, and I don't think you're bringing him back. So, I don't know. But either way, what you have with Andy is just a very high floor kind of veteran. And that's not a guy who you're going to bring in to be anything more than a bridge.
You mentioned that with Geno. Did it ever come out on why he ended up getting slugged in the jaw?
Talk shit, get hit.
I didn't know if there was any other kind of story behind it.
I think that, a source has told me, talk shit, get hit.
Heard that.
Yeah.
Heard that.
So there's this graph you could look at.
Yes, right.
Fuck
around and find out, right?
Yeah. If you fuck around at a 7 and you bring that over to the x-axis, then you will find out at a 7. Yeah, okay. That is my resources have told me that is what happened.
Gotcha.
He effed around and he found out. But yeah. But it's funny because at the time I was working in Myrtle Beach, and I would always tell my sports editor at the time, his name was Dave Wetzel, and we had this running joke that it was like, if you sign Ryan Fitzpatrick to be your backup quarterback, you are guaranteeing you might as well just throw your starting quarterback off a cliff, because Ryan Fitzpatrick will be starting for your team in some way. It'll be ridiculous, however it happens, right? Like Geno Smith will get punched in the face and break his jaw, and Ryan Fitzpatrick will be your starting quarterback. It is inevitable, and just by signing him, you have cursed your starter. And that's like Ryan Fitzpatrick started the rest of that season, and he actually played pretty well. He ended up on the Bucs, and then Jameis gets suspended, and then Ryan Fitzpatrick is, it's the curse of the Fitz. But yeah,
it's the Fitz magic. Yeah,
that is the real Fitz magic. All right, let's get a couple more questions in here and we can clear out. Leslie Cushenberry says, first round hooker, second round defensive tackle, third round running back, fourth round safety. What do you think? How does that sound? Pass it on to Loomis.
Well, he's going to throw that out because hooker in the first round's not happening.
Yeah, I don't think you're drafting Hooker in the first round. But at the same time, if you do believe in Hendon Hooker, I'm okay with it. Like, that's the thing is, you don't wait around to if you think he's the guy. Now, if you don't think he's the guy, you're not drafting him at all. So, I almost think that if you are going to draft Hendon Hooker, you do draft him at 29, because if you don't, and you say, well, he is the guy, we have evaluated him, and he checks all of our boxes, and then you say, but we're going to try to steal him at 40, and then he goes at 36. Well, then you have mismanaged your situation, right? It's the same reason, like when Dave Gettleman took Daniel Jones at number 6, everyone lost their collective mind. They're like, I can't believe you did that. You could have got him at 17. Well, sure, maybe, but if you truly believe that he's your franchise quarterback, then you can't guarantee you get him at 17. So you will draft him at number 6, and you will take Dexter Lawrence at 17. And you can say all the crap you want about Dave Gettleman. He nailed those 2 draft picks. And that was the pick he got in the Odell Beckham trade. How good has Odell Beckham been? So, I think when you're drafting a quarterback, you do have to just go for it if you think he's the guy. You are not trying to get a value on your pick, right? And so, that's why when you get out of the first round, if your quarterback has not been taken in the first round and all 32 teams have passed on him, it's a pretty good indicator that you don't believe in him. And that's why, Malik Willis goes until the 4th round until someone's like, oh, fine, I'll take Malik Willis.
No, I'll backtrack that on Hooker too about the first round, just because you get that 5th-year option with the rookie deal.
Yes, that is a significant thing for quarterbacks, right?
Right.
Especially a guy who might not be ready to start right away.
Absolutely.
So, I'm okay. Again, I'm not sold on Hendon Hooker, but I'm not going to say you wouldn't take him at 29 versus 40. I would almost argue that if you are going to take Hendon Hooker, you better take him at 29, because you can't guarantee he's there at 40. But I still don't think that.
Maybe you can move down a couple spots and get some more picks too. I'm just saying.
Not if you're trying to draft Hendon Hooker. That's my point.
What's that?
Not if you're trying to draft a quarterback.
No, but even say at 29, if you think that's even still too little early for Hooker, maybe you can get back even later in the first and still now.
You're not listening to me at all, Steve. What if you trade back and then the guy you traded for, the team you traded with, drafts Hendon Hooker?
Right. I hear you there. I just don't think that I could be obviously totally wrong. We're still way early into the whole NFL draft countdown shenanigans, but I just don't think Hooker's going to be a guy that's thought of in the first round. But it is early right now.
I agree. Well, so one of the people give the Saints crap about not trading up. Not trading back.
Trading down,
and
right.
I think one of the reasons that you need to understand they don't do that is because the Saints are kind of a target drafting team. They are not a team that sits around and then like waits to see who's there and then drafts from a pool available. They identify their target.
They want it, they go get it, right?
And then they go get them, right? And so the reason you don't see them trade down is because when they make their evaluation and they're confident about a player, they're confident and they go get them. They don't want to take a guy who they might have an 80 grade on when there's a guy they have a 95 grade on. And the reason they took the 80 was because they were trying to get cute. Like, look at the Giants, for example. Another Giants one is they traded down from 10 with the Bears, who went up and got Justin Fields. And they were like, well, we'll just take whoever's there at 20 something. And you know who that player was that they drafted? Kadarius Toney.
Yeah.
The wide receiver who is now on the Chiefs,
right,
in playing in the Super Bowl next week, right? So like, it's not as simple as, well, we're going to get the most value, and by doing that, we're taking a player that we might not be as confident in from a grade perspective. Now, again, the Saints have a bad habit of whiffing on these players that they're confident in anyway, so that doesn't necessarily add up. But that's the reason you don't see a lot of trades back, because fundamentally, it goes against the philosophy of, we really like this guy, we're going to go get him. So
no, that's something even, I think it was Ireland that mentioned at the Senior Bowls. It's, you don't wait around for your guy. You, like you just said, it's all about, that's our dude. We want him. We're going to go get him. That's it. Simple as that. No fucking around with it.
And again, like I said, traditionally speaking, you're not finding a starting quarterback outside of the first round, at least. Yeah. Otherwise it's just dumb luck, and you're not trying to throw darts, right? Like, that's another thing Ireland said. It's like you're not just throwing darts and hoping you hit something. That's not what good drafting teams do. Here's Leslie again, says, first round, please, no Anthony Richardson. I think Anthony Richardson is one of the more fascinating players to me because I've watched him play a good bit. Like I've watched him lose to LSU and look bad doing it. And it's like, that's the guy that everyone's like convinced is a top 10 pick.
I don't think so either.
Like he can't. Like I don't think he can throw. Like at least not with accuracy. Like he can make all the combine throws, and that's what's going to end up happening. Is he's going to go to the combine, everyone's going to get enamored with his 40 time, and he's going to make these Zach Wilson practice throws, and everyone's going to be like, "Wow, he can do it. He can make all the throws." But then it's like, put it on the tape, guys. Like don't look at the plays that he extends for 20 seconds and then find somebody in the end zone. Look at every other play. Right? Look at the baseline. It's not there. And like it's wild to me that suddenly Anthony Richardson is a top 10 pick. I don't get it. But
no, to me,
okay, I agree with you, Leslie.
I would think, accuracy and just decision making in general are a problem for me with him.
I agree. Louise Lockett, is the Saints NFC South dynasty over? Well, I think yes. Yeah. I think definitively it is, considering the Bucs have won the NFC South for 2 consecutive seasons. But
when we get a Hall of Fame quarterback back in New Orleans, maybe we can start ruling the roost again.
But what I will say is that it's open for the taking.
Yeah.
Whichever team finds a quality quarterback first has a massive head start in the next NFC South dynasty, right? Like think about this. Think about
Sam Bradford's like, who, me?
Right. Like Sam Bradford?
Yeah.
Sam Darnold.
Sam Darnold. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't know. Sam Bradford might be the best option in the NFC South, right? Sam Darnold is the longest tenured quarterback in the NFC South right now. Right?
That's crazy. Yeah.
Like the only quarterback on the Bucs roster with Tom Brady retiring is Kyle Trask.
Yeah. That's crazy.
The only quarterback on the Saints roster right now is Jameis Winston, who they have benched, and like they would never go back. Like maybe they do go back to him because they don't have any other options, but like that's awkward. You're gonna have to mend some fences first.
We'll see Jake Luton before we see Jameis Winston.
Luton. Yes, he is the only other player that is actually rostered by the Saints. Is Jake?
See,
Luton.
I don't want to go all fancy with the last name, and it is fancy. It just
fancy.
Looks like Luton to me.
He's tall. He's handsome.
Luton.
4th round pick.
Luton.
Got great hair.
I'm sure that'll go great in the stat sheet.
Right. And then Desmond Ridder, right? Like a guy who threw for 78 yards or whatever it was against the Saints.
Right.
In his debut. Like these are the quarterbacks in the NFC South. So all that is to say, like, while the dynasty, the 5 straight NFC South championships, yeah, of course that's over. But there's no reason that the Saints can't get a quarterback and be the dominant team in the NFC South again, because there is no dominant team. It's just like there for the taking.
Yeah, the Bucks dynasty just went kaput with Brady retiring for sure.
Exactly. It was short-lived. So Louise, she's been making fun of us ever since you left. She says, I get it. Jeff is like the Frodo Baggins, as Steve is Samwise Gamgee, except they have beards. That's Louise Lockett. Well, first off, Steve is clean-shaven. Second off, you are correct. I do have hairy feet. And wait, hold on. I think I told you last week that I have a Frodo Baggins Funko Pop.
I was going to get insulted. We were being called hobbits.
Halflings. We can go with halflings.
There you go.
Can walk very quietly, which is a lie. I think my neighbors would tell you that I do not walk quietly at all. But I do have hairy feet, and I do like shiny objects.
I'm 6'2", so I'm not part of the halflings.
I was just bragging. All right. Silver chime. One more. Osiris Torrance, offensive lineman from Florida, arguably the best interior blocker in the draft. Yes, he went to he was at UL. He followed Billy Napier down to Florida. He did look really good. Like he was very much a first round pick out there. Like he was not getting moved by anybody. There is one other player that I will mention as like this is a guy who I could see the Saints targeting. Is I need to look up his name because I will say it wrong.
Offensive lineman?
His name is Olusegun Oluwatimi. He is a center for Michigan who I think profiles very well to kick out to guard. And I think if you're the Saints and you like the development that happens at Michigan from their offensive line, it's still Jim Harbaugh, it's still the same staff. And now you can be like, hey, we have 3 centers. You look good. He did look good. And so and I say this jokingly, but I also say like the logic you use to draft Cesar Ruiz would be the same logic you use to draft this guy in like the 3rd or 4th round. Is like you want guys who can cross train there. And like if you need a guy to move into center. And like I think he's a guy who you could have be a backup guard center and do both of those things and have a profile like he's going to be like a 4th or 5th round pick. But I could see them drafting him, and I need to just learn how to say his name. Olusegun Oluwatimi.
No, the O-line is definitely an area that needs addressing. Really all around. I don't have a problem with looking for any kind of more help for just depth wise.
Yeah. No, I think the interior offensive line and the interior defensive line are both positions that I think would be worth looking at. But yeah, Osiris Torrance looked very good. He's a guy who maybe the Saints do go after at 29 if they're really looking to shore up the interior line because he's a guard. He's definitely a guard.
Oh, and Saints fans would that would be a Saints pick right there, and then
drive people nuts.
Fans would be so pissed off because
lose their mind. But it would be a good pick, and I would say good pick, and everyone would be like, oh.
That's definitely the angry crowd noise right there.
Exactly what they sound like. Okay, one more, and then we'll go fly high. I think it's fly high. FLYYJAII, fly high. What about wide receiver? If Keyshawn is sitting there at 29, I'm not sold on Keyshawn Boothe personally. I've watched a lot of Keyshawn Boothe, and he has not. Like, he's going to get drafted in the 1st round based solely on the game against Ole Miss 3 years ago. like he has not reached that point again, and he has been very good, but he has not been a 1st round pick, in my opinion. There are a lot of intriguing wide receivers in this draft, but I'm not going after Keyshawn. Like, the reason Keyshawn is in this draft in my opinion, unless you believe the rumors, is that this is a very weak wide receiver draft. Now, I think Jordan Addison is good. What's his name? Kid from Michigan State. Hold on. I need to look up his name.
Now, you still think Keyshawn is a first-round pick this year, though?
Someone might do it, but I don't like him. Jaden Reed from Michigan State is the guy who I don't know where he's going to go in the draft, but if you're out at the Senior Bowl and you're watching these guys run around, he's unguardable. Like he was just running alone the entire week. So that's the guy I would look at. But I don't think you're going to see the Saints go wide receiver in the first round 2 years in a row, especially because you feel pretty confident in the two young receivers you have, and you want to develop them, not add more traffic to that room. Now, you might go out and sign somebody. I think you do need to bring in a veteran that isn't Traquan Smith. But I don't think you're using the first round pick on a receiver. I'd be surprised if you draft a receiver at all. He is so good. So good. He blocks like a pro. All right. Here's one more from Leslie. Trade both 5th round picks to move up and get an offensive guard to replace Andrews Pete. Please. Leslie has very specific requests, and I appreciate that. He's not messing around.
And I think this was another frustrating year, obviously, for dealing with Andrews Pete. Just we know what kind of player he is, and it just every season is going to be a struggle with him dealing with some kind of ailment.
Yeah, no, I think you need to do something at the interior line. That's why I'd be perfectly fine with Osiris Torrance at 29 if you got there, right? Like I think that is a very important position to shore up, even with Andrews Pete still on the roster, because you're at a point where you just need quality depth. And I love Calvin Throckmorton, but I'm tired of seeing him on the field, right? He's not the guy. We know that. He's solid, a practice squad guy, but he is not the guy you want to start every time Andrews Pete gets hurt, which is once every 3 games.
And one of the pillars of these teams we've seen when they were so successful, obviously, that the strength of the O-line, the depth of the O-line, and we'll be talking, I'm sure, a lot about building that back up in this offseason.
I agree. But all right, I think that's it for me. You got anything else, Steve, before we head out?
No, just counting down to college baseball season. I don't know if you're a fan.
Gross.
Nah.
I can't. No, you're not getting me on that one. But you should tune into Sports Talk tomorrow from 4 to 7 p.m. Steve and I are hosting. I say tomorrow, this is a podcast. So Friday, 4 to 7 p.m., WWL AM 870 FM 105.3, and always free on the Odyssey app, just like this podcast that you should already had subscribed to. If you haven't done that already, leave us a 5-star rating because you love us and we have hairy feet. Yeah, this has been fun. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone for throwing in comments and suggestions and Hobbit comparisons. It's all been fun.
Cast the ring into the fire, Frodo.
Yes. We're going to cast the ring of this podcast into the fire of the internet. Thanks everybody. All right. Peace.
Later.